talking about fretboard vision and scales and so forth, I just arrived at the concept modes. What is a mode? A mode is a series of notes that you can play between do and do, and I mean do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, in any key. Some of them sound kind of bluesy, like I'm playing Mixolydian right there. Some of them sound kind of minor and trippy. Here's the good news. Just like our major scales and pentatonics that we were discussing a moment ago, guitar affords us the ability to do everything everywhere, to play every mode across all 6 strings at every fret, using the fretboard as our answer key, if you will. So really, what it comes down to, assuming that you've already worked with me on major scales, is changing your solo scale and having more options for what to do. There's a song in G major, you know? You could play the G major scale. You could play G major pentatonic, E minor pentatonic. But then what if you wanted to play G Mixolydian? If you sat down and learned G Mixolydian, which is the major scale with a flat 7th for your entire instrument as a new concept, at some point a light would probably go off and you would just realize, wait, I'm just playing the C major scale. This is exactly the same as my C major fingerings with no addition of new notes or concepts. So you may think as though this is a song in G, I'm going to play the C major scale, and just know that you will end up playing Mixolydian. That rather than going across the fretboard and mapping out a bunch of flat 7ths, that you will just hit them going on faith, and it works. You would. We're not going to ignore theory. When we learn modes, we're going to talk about what scale degrees are raised and lowered, how they sound, which ones are most useful in the modern guitar skill set, and in what contexts. But the wonderful news is you'll never have to learn them all as autonomous concepts. Again, like I've said on some of my other videos, guitar affords us the ability to do everything up front, and then understand it, execute it, and really understand every aspect of the music theory as we go. And that's a more appropriate way to approach it than trying to think in piano as though we just have one line of notes. Most instruments, there's nothing else for it. You want to think about G major, you just have to think about one chart. But we don't just have this. We have a grid. We have, horizontal and vertical. So, modal playing, if you learned major scales with me, it'll just turn out that you already know how to use them. What we just discussed is knowing how to do it all. Again, being able to just pick up your instrument and make it talk, so to speak, and know how every single thing you're going to sound is, just for that's a long-term project, and anything that implied otherwise was incorrect. So being able to explore the fretboard, including modal playing, does not require thinking on a Music 1 college level. And the best way to learn it for modern playing and any other style, in my opinion, on this instrument where we do have this grid, is to learn how to do it and then understand it and apply it from that perspective. If you've tried to learn modes and you understand anything about music theory whatsoever, this should be kind of exciting. Something I said a little while ago is it's just a new set of options. If you already know how to play major scales, for a while it might, you might be used to doing relative major, relative minor conversions already because it came up organically when you were learning to play guitar. There will be similar conversions for the other modes. Whether you think about a phrasing or just go G Mixolydian to C major, and then off you go playing in C major again in this song in G. And it just works. We're not ignoring any aspect of what we're doing, aside from, again, we're not implying that you're supposed to magically know what note you're playing and be able to just make it talk. when you're really just working on structure right now. Which dots do I hit, and with what finger, and in what context, and what is it going to sound like? So there it is. We don't just have one line of notes. We've got a grid. Something I was discussing in the first discussion of scales as applied on guitar that you might want to go back and look at if you didn't watch that one. It's in the same playlist. Guitar lets us do it all up front and understand and interpret it as we go. We don't have to think in piano. There is no upside. We're not cutting corners to approach it the way that we've just discussed. A more visual learning system that we can equate to how we learned our bar chords. We just learned that, hey, look, I can just use E shapes and A shapes to play every chord everywhere. And then when we're playing, we're not thinking about chord theory. The ability to be able to conceptualize every note you're playing and every bit of theory as you go is a long-term project that there's no way to shortcut. Being able to do it all on our instrument is a short-term project, and that should be exciting. So there's the good news, is you can play everything everywhere, and modal playing can be something that you tackle visually rather than from a music theory perspective. Again, we won't be ignoring theory. So that pretty much covers what people do when they're playing lead guitar, single notes, whether it's a solo, which is the most obvious application of what we've been discussing on these two videos, or anything, the central riff to the song. Probably 95% of modern guitar playing is some version of major scales, some version of pentatonic scales, which are like our blues rock scales. And then the rest is something based on like chord shapes. So there it is, there's good news. We can learn to do everything everywhere and then discuss the theory and go over it. Or, theoretically, you could never even learn music theory and just explore your fretboard and your interaction with notes and intervals and scales as a long-term project, the long-term project that it has to be. There you have it. That's how we'll be approaching the fretboard. And once we get you to that spot where you can picture everything everywhere, it's a new ball game. Everything you've ever played, you'll see fitting into a larger structure. Anything we learn subsequently, you'll see fitting into a larger structure. So, there you have it. We're not going to think in piano. We're going to think in modern guitar and use a visual learning system. And we can do it all up front and learn to understand it and interpret it as we go.